Hello and welcome to Charity Retail Learning. This short session is going to tell you a little bit of an overview about charity retail, how it works, a little bit about our history and an update on the market information and where things are at in 2021. We're going to start by giving a little bit of an overview about how charity shops work in case you don't know. So charities, for one reason or another, decide to move into charity retail. So that's obviously thinking about finding an income source, a profile raising, lots of different reasons why people choose to move into charity retail. And they'll take a unit or more normally on high street, on a parade. And one of the things that is a bit of a myth about charity shops is that that they get free rents, and that's not true. So the vast majority of charities will pay full market rent for the units that they take. They do receive an 80% mandatory rate relief because they are working for a charitable cause, but in most cases, like I say, they pay full market rents. So the shops are established and the goods are donated. So stock is primarily brought in by the public to the shop. So that might come in a number of different ways. People might bring it to the shop themselves, or the charities might have ways of going out and picking up that stock, either directly from people's homes or using clothing banks or donation stations. Lots of different ways that stock can come in. So those goods might come in, and that will cover a whole range of items. So it might be from kitchen goods, clothing, furniture, books, media, all kinds of things will come into the shops. Some shops are more specialised and so will only take particular types of products. Some will take everything. Once those goods arrive, then what needs to happen is the goods need to be checked to make sure that they're saleable. So not everything that comes in can be sold. Sometimes that's for health and safety reasons, so they might not meet up to health and safety regulations, or sometimes it's because the item just isn't of sufficient standard, or there's no market for it if it's something that's gone very much out of fashion, or if it's dirty or torn or ripped or anything like that. So the team in the shop, primarily volunteers, will look through the donations that have been brought in and will choose the things that they feel are fit for the shop floor and the things that aren't. So the things that are fit for the shop floor will then go on to be prepared for sale. So in clothing terms, generally that involves steaming them with a hot steamer. So what that does is just it takes the creases out of the items, and it freshens them up and brightens them up and gets them ready for sale. It also gives the team another chance to have another better, closer look at the item to make sure they haven't missed any marks or damage on there. And then they'll be priced. If the items have been gift aided, then the gift aid details will be captured there. And what that means is when that's sold, the money that's generated, then we go back to the donor and we say, you gave us this blouse, it made £5 when we sold it. If you are happy for us to keep that £5, we can then claim 25% gift aid from the government. Are you happy for us to keep it? And that's how gift aid works in charity shops, very briefly. So gift aid details will go on it, and they'll either be put on a hanger or whatever needs to be done with that item, and they'll go out for sale. Things like bric-a-brac is often cleaned and washed and brightened up, and will go out onto the shelves. So things that haven't met the grade in terms of being sold, most of that will be recycled or disposed of, but primarily recycled. So charity shops work with textile recyclers who will take textile and often other things too, and they have a whole market where they then move that on. And lots of textile recyclers will also take things like metal now, or we have book recyclers as well, who work across the sector and support charities in making sure that we're basically throwing as little away as possible. And we will talk a little bit later about the environmental impact of charity shops. So once the goods are out for sale, what tends to happen is when they're priced, they are also dated, and so that the shop knows when that item went out onto the shop floor, so they know how long it's been out there. So the goods go out for sale onto the shop floor. Hopefully somebody sees it, buys it, and that's great, and then there's money in the till for the charity. If something doesn't sell, then after a particular length of time, then items will be taken off. So usually, sector averages is about 2 weeks is sort of best practice, that something would be out on a shop floor. Excuse me. And so those goods, then often charities will either send them to another shop in their chain if they've got multiple shops in their chain. So it might move to another shop and be sold for a little bit of a lower price again, or it might be moved on to a clearance shop. So we're seeing now quite a lot of clearance shops where everything's sold for £1, and everything just moves on to there and gets sold from there. And otherwise, those items will then be ragged and disposed of in the same way as those items that weren't saleable in the first place. And charity shops are not always, but usually have a single paid staff member, at least one paid staff member. So although some charities do still run entirely by volunteers. So a paid shop manager is usual. Sometimes they're supported by an assistant manager or a sales assistant, but primarily charity shops are staffed by volunteers. So people who give their time for free, and they bring their skills and their expertise and their wonderful personalities, and they make the wheels turn, and they really do absolutely every job that there is available to do in a charity shop, and the sector would be absolutely lost without them. So just a little kind of a bit of a history really of charity shops. There was some sort of early work by people like the British Red Cross, the Salvation Army and Oxfam, as well as some sort of smaller charities. And there's a bit of a kind of contention about who opened the first charity shop, but I think British Red Cross had some gift shops, they called them, that they opened in the late 19th century, but Oxfam really are kindly widely acknowledged to be the people who opened the first charity shop that looks like a charity shop that we know today, and there's a picture of it there, as you can see, and that was open on Broad Street in Oxford in 1947, post-war. So the reason this shop came to be open was Oxfam was originally the Oxford Committee for Famine Relief and was set up to help Greek refugees during World War II, and they appealed for clothes and blankets to send them out to Greece, and they had a huge response and left them with stock left over. So in order to raise funds, they decided to sell them, and that's what became the shop, the charity shop in Broad Street, which still trades today as an Oxfam shop. So following those early pioneers of charity retail, other charities began to start to think about opening charity shops and realising the benefits they could bring. And apart from bringing in an income, which is the obvious reason that people would think about, one of the things about the type of income that charity shops can bring is that it's regular and it's unrestricted. So I'll just talk a little bit about that. Charities have many costs that they need to meet in order to deliver their services. So there's obviously the direct sort of service delivery of paying for, in a hospice, for example, for paying for a medical team to deliver the care, or to run an animal home for that kind of charity, all sorts of different costs that people have. And donors very generously support that. And the way that sometimes donors support charities is to want to spend money on something particular. So they might want to contribute to buy a bed for a hospice, or to contribute to a building, or to buy a piece of equipment. And whilst those things are really important and really valued, one of the things that is always a challenge for charities is to cover their core costs. So things like paying the bills of utilities, so gas and electricity, paying for staff wages, things like that, which are really necessary and vital costs in terms of making an impact through their charity, but are less attractive as a sort of specific thing that people want to pay for. So to be able to get that income that is unrestricted, that can cover those core costs, and also that the charity can use in a way that they see fit at a particular time. So for example, if there was an earthquake and a charity wanted to divert some of the money that it has got to that particular earthquake, unrestricted income would allow them to do that, because it wasn't given directly for a particular project, it was given for the charity to spend as they see fit. So that makes a charity flexible, it makes it responsive, it makes it be able to spend the money where it's needed the most. So that unrestricted income that a charity shop can bring is really valuable. The other thing about charity shop income is it's regular. It comes in week after week, it's quite predictable, with one or two sort of fluctuations depending on the weather or other things that might be going on around and about. You can pretty much predict what's going to come in week by week, and that's a really helpful thing to know when you're thinking about managing accounts. And if you compare that to an event, so if you have a big event planned and then there's a huge rainstorm and nobody comes to your event, then you had thought you were going to have all that money in, and then suddenly you're not going to. So that then, it becomes difficult to manage. So regular unrestricted income is incredibly valuable to charities. The other thing that charity shops bring is the high street profile. So by having shops on a high street, people learn about the charity. And if we think about Oxfam again, Oxfam is a household name because of its charity shops, not because of the work it does. That was not the thing that people got to know it from. People understood and knew about Oxfam because they've got shops on the high street. So charities started to see the benefits of this and began to open shops. So Sue Ryder, who are a neurological and hospice charity, opened a number of stores in the 1950s, and then really after that sort of significant numbers started to come in the 60s, and this was really fueled by that emergence of that throwaway disposable consumer culture. Rationing had finished, the swinging 60s were in full flow, people felt a bit more affluent and started to buy and throw away effectively goods. So we started to have that kind of much more sort of consumerist culture, and by replacing things all the time, what that did was create this surfeit of goods that still had life left in them that charity shops could use as stock to sell on. So that drove the stock feed for charity shops, which allowed them to grow. And sort of really by the 80s, we began to see charity shops on almost every high street, and they became an everyday part of UK life. So charity shops, as I said, have become established as part of everyday life. And in the early days, really, they were pretty much kind of focused on low price, on a value offer, on offering something that was cheaper for people to buy. And there was actually still a little bit of a stigma for some people attached to shopping in a charity shop. But over the years, that's changed, and the market that that charity shops attract has become broader. So that's including people who are interested in fashion, who perhaps wanted a different look, something a bit more unique. Vintage came in certainly in the early 90s, and we started to have that interest in vintage fashion. Younger people started shopping in charity shops, and fashionable people started looking for great pieces from charity shops. So things started to change. And we also then started to see specialism. So in the early 90s, I was a shop manager with Oxfam, and it was in a shop that sold furniture and vintage. So we started to see kind of Oxfam moving into furniture retailing and also specialising in books and standalone bookshops. And over the years, we've seen different charities really kind of start to inhabit those spaces of those sort of specialist shops. So British Heart Foundation, for example, has that huge network now of furniture and electrical goods shops, which are very successful, as do some other national charities such as Deborah, and lots of other local charities now have their own furniture offer as well as a standalone unit. Bookshops are a big part of what we see on the charity retail offer now. The picture on here is St Clair Hospice in Essex, and that's their Bishop Stortford shop, and it sells just books and music. And we also started to see kind of vintage and high-end fashion, and much more over the sort of late last decade really. And Mary's Living and Giving shops, which came from the Mary Porter's project, where she worked with Save the Children, that really kind of helped sort of shake up the sector and make us really start to think about boutique looks and merchandising and showing stock in a different way. So the other shop shown on this picture is a Mary's Living and Giving shop, and you can see it's a bit more high end, a bit more boutique, kind of focused on the kind of the more fashionable end of the market. And we've seen lots of that now. So wherever we go, we can see that segmentation happening on the high street. And charities have started to work where they will move stock around. So rather than, if they've got multiple shops, rather than taking in everything and selling it all from that particular shop, they'll pick the stock that works for a specific style. So for example, in a boutique shop, they might gather stock from other shops in their chain and then present it in a boutique shop in an area where the market is really suited for that type of product. So we can start to see how things have got much sharper over the years. So as we've seen with mainstream, charity retail has also taken advantage of the new digital shopping culture and has moved online. So, I mean, obviously, the benefits of selling online is that you have just a much bigger market for your products. So, particularly items which are either unusual or have a higher value can often do much better selling online than they will do in a bricks and mortar shop. So, most charities have started out using eBay, and we've seen lots of really great charities eBay shops over the last decade. But lots of new platforms are being used now and coming into play. So some of the ones down here are Thriftify, which is a charity shop only site, so it just sells items through from charities. And then there's Facebook Marketplace, which tends to be a more local and often for larger items operation. We've got Depop, which is, obviously for younger people, generally more fashion conscious. Aid Books, which is one that lots of people have been using for a long time, which is obviously a specialist bookseller. And then companies like Vinted, which are kind of newish to the market and are selling sort of everyday clothes. So charity retailers are really wising up to this now and starting to kind of segment their online offer in the same way that we've seen segmentation in bricks and mortar. So choosing different platforms to sell different products so that they're reaching the right audience. There are some charities which operate their own online sales. Quite a lot will sell new goods through their own websites, but Oxfam is a notable one which has its own online shop and runs that on its own, and has been working on that for a very long time and has had great success with it, particularly over the last couple of years. And of course, COVID and the closure of mainstream retail, of high street retail, has accelerated people's move online. Lots of people, when the shops shut, decided they needed to focus more on that, quite rightly, and they have been really successful in doing that. So that's great. But one of the things to really think about is that charities, bricks and mortar shops work collaboratively and sort of next door to their online offer. So the shops might be promoting the fact that they've got an online shop, and the online shop should be talking about the charities as well, about the shops, the high street shops. So they work together, and obviously the stock comes into the charity shops and then can be fed through to the online platform as appropriate. So how does the sector look today? So charity retail now is an important and profitable part of the national retail sector. It's been outperforming commercial retail on the high street for many years now, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the detail of that later. It's a well-networked and collaborative sector, and that's really primarily down to the Charity Retail Association, which is the membership association for charity retailers in the UK and beyond. And the Charity Retail Association offer lots of different services to the sector, including lobbying for policy change. They offer advice and information to the sector. They offer training through the Charity Retail Learning and other conferences. A really important part of what they do is networking and bringing different charity retailers together of all different sizes to learn from each other and share information. And they also conduct really important research into the sector. So what I'm going to do now is hand you over to Robin Osterley, who's the Chief Exec of the Charity Retail Association, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about what they do and a little bit about how charity retail operates, and a few stats and figures about where we're at now.
Thank you, Vicky, and hi everyone. So as Vicky said, my name is Robin Osterley. I'm Chief Executive of the Charity Retail Association. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the current state of the market. So there's around 11,200 charity shops in the UK, something in the region of 9,000 of which we have in membership, which is great for us. Between them, they raise something in the region of £1/3 billion for good causes. And it's important to realise that that is profit. It's not just income. That is actually the contribution that the shops make to the charities themselves. And as Vicky said earlier, it's unrestricted income. So it's money that they can use for whatever they need to, and it's regular, and it's accessed quickly, and it's really, really important source of income for them. The number of shops has probably declined slightly over the last couple of years, but we don't really see that as a negative thing, because in actual fact, what a lot of shops have done is they've maybe got larger, they've got bigger shops, or in some cases they're simply going for a program of improving the shops that they've got rather than simply opening more and more and more shops. So it's not a negative, and this is exemplified by the fact that profits are actually rising and have been rising year on year for the past few years, even across slightly fewer shops. Around 90% of the goods that are sold by charity shops are actually donated by members of the public. So it's fantastic to have such a high proportion of donated goods, and it's a testament to the generosity of the UK public that we're able to keep our stock running on pretty much entirely on donated goods. It's amazing. There's about 26,000 full-time employees in the sector, which is a number that's gone up recently, actually. And there's an incredible number of volunteers, something like 233,000 volunteers, which makes us the largest volunteering force, the largest single volunteering force in the UK. One of the most important things that charity shops do is their positive impact towards the environment. So of course they are promoting reuse. They are the principal conduit in this country for clothing in particular to be reused. And if it can't be reused for any reason, if it can't be sold for reuse, then they're also responsible in a lot of cases for recycling the stuff that isn't sellable across the counter. So by these means, there's a huge reduction in landfill and incineration created by charity shops. As it says, there are around 339,000 tonnes of textiles alone were kept out of landfill and incineration in the last year we've got records for. And that is actually about half of the UK's textile production. So if it wasn't for what charity shops do, there'd be about twice as much going into landfill and incineration as is the case. And of course this saves local authorities huge amounts of money in landfill tax, which obviously allows them to spend that money on other local services. In so doing all of this, of course, we are reducing the carbon footprint of the UK very significantly, and we're also making a contribution to slowing down, if you like, fast fashion. If you want an affordable and sustainable alternative to buying incredibly cheap clothes in retailers that I'm sure we could all name, then charity shops offer that fantastic alternative. And we're finding now more and more charities involved in upcycling projects, trying to make what they're doing even more important in terms of providing new furniture or newer furniture, refurbished and upcycled furniture, and sometimes clothes and other things as well. So it's a really good method of converting old decrepit stock into new stuff, and upcycling is something that's becoming more and more significant amongst charity shops. And of course this is all local, or almost all local. Most stock is received locally, it's sold locally, and as a result it cuts down on pollution and if you like, clothes miles of moving things around and about. And finally, I just want to say a little bit about charity shops in the community, because they often act as a really important community hub. They might run cafes, they might provide internet access, they might run local events, they might have connections with other services, indeed other charities in the locality, where they can form a really important part of the community. And of course, they also provide these 233,000 volunteers with fantastic opportunities, whether it's meeting people, keeping busy, getting out of the house, or especially in the case of young people, learning new skills, customer service skills, money handling skills, lots of other things. Fantastic opportunities provided to volunteers. And finally, of course, a good charity shop will be essentially providing a portal to a charity's services, whether that's just signposting or in some cases actually allowing people to access the services online in the shop itself, and having people on hand to help customers access those services. So all in all, charity shops play an incredibly important part in the community and an incredibly important part in the ecology of the high street and in the ecology of the charity sector as a whole. Back to you, Vicki.
So to recap then, charity retail is an ever-evolving and important part of our high street and our online retail culture. Charity shops contribute on many levels, helping charities to deliver vital services all over the country. The Charity Retail Association has a wealth of information and support for charities involved in trading operations. So for more information, do visit their website, which is charityretail.org.uk. Thanks so much. We hope you've enjoyed the session.